I'm very pleased to welcome you all and to welcome a very esteemed author, not just an author, but someone I consider a genuine friend here, Ryan Williams. He and I went to university together, and he has a very esteemed background that I think a lot of you are familiar with and have seen. And I'd appreciate if you all give him a round of applause to welcome Ryan to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone here. It's a pleasure to be up in Mountain View at Google. So I'd like to start off by giving y'all self a round of applause for coming out today and spending some time to talk about influencers. So give it up for yourselves. So this book is called The Influencer Economy. It's about how to launch your idea, share it with the world, and thrive in the digital age. So today we'll be thinking about how we can influence others to collaborate, to share our ideas, to help build products people love. Because ultimately, when you collaborate with your community, your customers, and influential leaders in your field, you become an influencer yourself. So this all started for me when I was 22 years old. I'm a former clinically depressed person. And I say this because I was 22 living in Washington, D.C., and you can only imagine what my apartment looked like. I had beer bottles and soda cans strewn across the floor. My bed was never made for weeks at a time. I had dishes all over the kitchen that were stacked up like you couldn't believe. I struggled to breathe, and I went to my day job as my main outlet. In order to get over the hump of being depressed, I did what any rational person would do. I became a stand-up comedian. Because why wouldn't you want to be the clinically depressed stand-up comedian where your main goal is to make strangers laugh at comedy clubs with their arms folded, drunk off flat beer, eating greasy chicken wings? Imagine this scenario with smoky bars in Baltimore, Washington, D.C., where your main goal is to make them laugh. How do you think it went? Well, if you find out a way for it to go well, please let me know. My parents, my therapists, and my now wife, who was then my girlfriend at the time, they were curious themselves. But I learned a lot about through stand-up was putting yourself out there and dealing with rejection is what makes the experience unique. And I ultimately pivoted my career. I listened to the market that told me, again, I'll let you be the decider if I was funny or not, but I ultimately listened to the market, and I was a marketing pro at stand-up. And I could fill amphitheaters and comedy venues and dive bars all over DC. And I had Comedy Central comedians call me up, texting me, saying, I headline at my show and 5 people come, but you can get 250. What's your secret? And that's when I realized I could pivot my career into marketing, and my aspirations of being an artist were going to be put on hold temporarily. So I left the comedy world and I moved to Los Angeles. And I worked at a couple of companies. I helped raise venture capital and run marketing. And as Googlers, who here is familiar with Machinima.com? We are a multi-channel network. For those that don't know, I see a lot of people are familiar. We're a gaming network on YouTube. So think about ESPN for gamers, where the sports, instead of being football or soccer, they're Call of Duty. They're Minecraft. And who here has played the game Minecraft? Who here's better question, whose kids or cousins have played Minecraft? Okay, more hands have showed up. Because ultimately, Minecraft was a game that we helped launch at Machinima with no budget. And I realized that our sales team was functioning really well, but we had no marketing. So we're young, we're energetic, we needed marketing collateral, we launched our social media, our branding, and we had a hungry team, and we were building this amazing product. You all, the majority of the room are technologists here. So you know the power of building a tech solution and how exciting it is. So we were acquired by Warner Brothers a couple months ago for $100 million. And ultimately, Machinima was one of the pioneering groups I've ever seen to galvanize a community because we built our products with the community. Our alpha, our beta, our launch. And our customers, like with Minecraft, which sold for $2.5 billion to Microsoft, they built it and we helped them because we led everyone into the creative process. So I was fascinated by influence, right? And the word influencer has been hijacked. It's been hijacked by a bunch of no talent zeros. Just because you get a bunch of likes on Instagram because you're sexy, or these jeans make you look sexy, it doesn't matter, right? Influencers does not equals followers. Influencers do not equal impressions. Influence is something where you want to make a dent in life. You want to be known. And if we look back in 20 years, Google will exist. I mean, it's up to you all to keep it in business. But Google will exist in 20 years, and we will Google people's names for influence, and we're not going to find some Instagram celebrity. We're not going to find someone who looks hot in jeans and was paid $25,000 to tweet about a product. That is not what an influencer is. So an influencer, to me, is someone who can create a movement around their idea through collaboration, community passion, and a shared vision. It's something connective, because ultimately, collaboration is where influence is derived. And influencers can change a small idea into a world-changing one seemingly overnight, because something small become big because influencers can endorse these ideas. And also, influence is gained through collaboration, often in a niche community, like we did at Machinima, where we had Minecraft gamers in a very specific game. We made videos around it. We built that community. And then finally, influence has nothing to do with impressions, has nothing to do with followers, and it has nothing to do with any vanity metric. Vanity metrics are not real-world metrics. And how I know this is because I did some research, because I live in LA, and everyone there is obsessed with celebrity. And Kim Kardashian and Ryan Seacrest are your textbook celebrities. So I went into their data, and what I found was our Machinima influencers could move the needle. We had hundreds of thousands of YouTube subscribers on these channels. And so people would play. Anyone here watch the Machinima video? It's a bunch of gameplay, oftentimes people narrating over Minecraft. And so imagine, like, instead of watching a football game with the announcers, that someone's playing Minecraft and telling funny stories about their life. They're called vlogs, right? Video logs. They're really big in YouTube. So these gamers that had hundreds of thousands of subscribers would make videos playing Minecraft, just educating people about the world that was in Minecraft. And in aggregate, these influencers with less celebrity followers, like these mascots up here, they were influencers because in their communities, in clusters of 5 to 10, these influencers moved the needle. And I think people like Seacrest, people like Kim Kardashian, they add value. They drive traffic, people watch their TV shows, they're cultural tastemakers. But they are not true social media influencers. Because again, the word has been hijacked. And they aren't no talent zeros like a lot of these influencers are on Instagram, because they do add value. But ultimately, I want to show you the data around why they're not influential online. So this is a slide literally I made years ago when I was doing research on celebrity investments in startups and how they move the needle. Because again, every Silicon Valley product, they want to connect with the celebrity. And they say, I want to get someone to tweet about my product and it'll be an overnight success. And that is wrong. Celebrities don't move the needle as much as very targeted, specific niche influencers. So this is Kim when she had a tweet. Again, I ripped this directly from a deck I made years ago. So this is anyone here familiar with Bitly, the data tracking software you can use to share links? So she shared an episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians to preview an episode. And she got around 83,000 clicks on Twitter, right? She has 18 million followers. So that conversion is less than a banner ad would be. Banner ads are terrible. Like, who here clicks on banner ads on purpose? Oftentimes I get mad, right? Because I accidentally click on it and I go back, go back, go back. So ultimately, the influencers are very niche and targeted, and Kim is super broad. So here you can see that she's around 0.46%. Banner ads on average are around 0.5%. So you may as well go spend a bunch of money on banner ads if you can spend a bunch of cash to get Kim Kardashian to tweet about your product or your club opening in Vegas or anything relevant to her community, because she's a broad celebrity. She's a mascot. And what's equally fascinating about this data is you notice the decay up here. In the first 48 hours is where the bulk of her traffic comes. So nothing is being recycled, nothing's being circulated amongst other influencer communities to keep this thriving, unlike the Minecraft videos, which are more timeless, more evergreen, and more personality-driven. So all this fascinations after I left Machinima, and I love what we were doing, those big ideas, we built the marketing team. I went on to some other startups and helped them raise capital and do marketing. But ultimately, I believe that the world is so fascinating right now because you can make a dent in doing something that you can leave influence around. And that ultimately, there's a bartering and there's an exchange of ideas. And we truly have navigated a new economy. So I wrote this book to help us learn how to operate in this new economy and helping to teach others, because learning is really the fundamental of how we exchange ideas. And oftentimes giving value is what matters, and that's how we navigate this new world. So Seth Godin, he's a fellow speaker at Google. I interviewed over 100 influencers for my podcast, which is called Stories from the Influencer Economy, because I wanted to build an idea and a platform ahead of my book launch. So I talked to Adam Grant, who, anyone seen his talk here? It's a really good talk, Dory Clark, and many other influential business writers. And I took their application and I applied their old knowledge with new influencers in the social media space. So Seth, why we'll be talking about him is because he's an influencer. He'll be around in 20 years when you Google his name. So he talks about a tribe and how a tribe is a group of people connected to one another, connected to a leader, connected to an idea. For millions of years, human beings have been part of one tribe or another. A group needs only two things to be a tribe: a shared interest and a way to communicate. Your company at Google is led by tribes. Everyone who has different teams from research to tech, you have a tribe leader and you are interested in connecting. And that's ultimately what happens with storytelling and sharing of ideas and why someone like Seth is an influencer. So these are the chapters of the book, which you all got in emoji. I researched this book years ago. I did this slide to connect with millennials because my parents didn't use emoji, but now my parents use emoji, so this slide is really for everyone. But ultimately, the emoji chapters of the book are how you craft your big vision. Every influencer I talk to has a big vision, a big idea to sell you on something. Like Sergey and Larry years ago, they had this big vision to solve a problem because you need buy-in from people to believe in what you're doing. Secondly is you pick a platform. I picked the suitcase emoji here because you got to pick somewhere you're going, and you need a channel. So it's no longer, oh, I want to go to coffee and pick your brain, right? Those people drive me nuts. I don't know, sorry if anyone in here does that. Sorry, not sorry, actually. Because ultimately, you want to collaborate with someone, and you pick a channel. It could be building an alpha version of your product. It could be you make YouTube content. For me, it was podcasting. And ultimately, we're building these relationships because that's what is currency in the influencer economy. The next thing is book your own gigs. You have to deal with rejection, like Jay-Z. Actually, this is the only emoji that I invented. I thought Jay-Z would need an emoji. I mean, who doesn't? If anyone earned an emoji, it's Jay-Z. So you got to deal with rejection. You have to build relationships, and you have to accept failure, and that you have to do every job. And I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, and it's known for corn farming. And I like to say, never build in a silo. Never build by yourself. This company was founded in a garage in Silicon Valley and Stanford, but that stereotype is over. People need to build with others. You have to share, because you need psychological and behavioral buy-in from people to help make your idea better, and then moreover, help spreading it. The next is adopt technology early and often. Influencers are always curious around technology. They need to find tech as a solution, and they can't be tech phobics. The next one is striving for authenticity. And authenticity is a word that's overused. I love the word, and I hate the word. Who here likes the word authentic? Who here doesn't like the word? Right? It's a very branded word. It's like influencer, right? It's been hijacked by a bunch of no talent zeros. So we're taking it back right now, because authenticity really means having a strong message and being comfortable in your own skin and being affable, being likable because you are who you are. And ultimately, we have flaws and we have characteristics that we can't always execute on. I wish I could say that every word coming out today will be perfect, but the more likely I am to admit that I'm not perfect, the more likely I'll be authentic. And you only know authenticity when you see it. And then we have collaboration, which we'll talk about a lot today, the fist bump. Capturing lightning in a bottle, that's something that you know, like when you double down or you need to pivot with your idea, because you have that moment where you know what your customers are telling you, that they either love it or they want you to go back to the drawing board. And then ultimately, you got to meet people in real life. You can't rely on the internet. You people live streaming at home, hopefully I'll get to meet you in person. But ultimately, you can't sit back and passively watch things on a laptop. Influencers and influential people go out and meet people in real life. And finally, you have to be a giver. You have to open doors for other people. And then you have to give people ownership of your idea. You have to let them buy in and celebrate with you your wins and your losses. Because I have a metaphor with Benihana. Who here has been to Benihana? You know how they cook the food in front of you, and they let you into the creative process. And you get to see the chef, and they do tricks, and you see what you're about to eat. And there's something psychologically fun about that. You get to meet people at a table that you don't ordinarily know. I used to celebrate my birthdays there when I was younger, growing up in Des Moines, Iowa. And we loved it because you celebrate with others. So you have to figure out a way to cook with the community and your customers to get them to buy in. So these are the 3 types of collaboration styles. And there's the collaborators. This is roughly 10% of your customer and community base. These folks are the techies, what I call the regulars. They're the ones you build the alpha, and they're going to show up like they would at a bar, drinking with their friends every Friday at happy hour. They're the happy hour crew, right? The regulars, they're the one that they're going to buy it when you pilot your program and give it out at a discount. Because you need to build these people as your proof of concept. And ultimately, they become early adopters. They become your brand ambassadors. And for me, with my book, getting it out to my friends, my family, my email list, psychologically, a lot of people wanted to help me because they were part of the process early. And so these are your collaborators. They validate it because people make mistakes, and they want to go to influencers early. And they pitch influencers, and they fall on their face. Because influencers are the next group, but you have to build the proof of concept out before you get the key stakeholders involved. I use the word key stakeholder because we're at a corporate company, right? Isn't key stakeholder like the most corporate word ever? Like, I talk in front of tech entrepreneurs, and I never mention that word. So you at home, just let you know I'm giving it to you as a very corporate branding here, because ultimately, I think that the influencers are the 1%ers that you have to have something to offer before they want to work with you. And you don't want to burn that bridge, because ultimately, they're the industry leaders. They're the authorities. They're the one to give you social proof, and they're your lead generators. If you find the right influencer to collaborate with, and again, don't ask them just for coffee. Ask them to review your alpha, to get feedback to make your product better. You don't want to ask them to tweet about it, right? Because that's unbecoming. And you also don't want to ask them for a favor. You don't want to have someone feel like they owe you something. Like, psychologically, influence comes from a win-win, from a mutual, you help me, I help you. And we'll talk more about this later, about giving as a big philosophy for influence. And the final step here is the mass marketers. People don't care often like if influencers endorse your product. When someone buys a Nest product, they just care that it works. They don't care that you had an ambassador program, that you had early adopters, that you had a bunch of people that gave you feedback, and you got it into Best Buy. They just want it at Best Buy. And so ultimately, the consumers, the buyers, the mass market, they're about 90% of the groups, right? So you want to build something for them, and it's fully baked, and they're going to buy it because it's already established. So getting into a couple key principles here of the book, this is the platform rule. My father-in-law is named Joe Moore. Who here is married? Of you know what father-in-laws are all about. Sometimes you love them. Sometimes whatever the opposite of love is, that's how you feel. So my father-in-law, he has no idea what I do in California. He says, how are these startups valued at hundreds of millions of dollars? What do you do to add that value to the company? Where's the money coming in? Because he runs a boiler repair company in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I talked to him about influence, and he was really curious about my book and what I'm working on. And I said, how do you define the word influence? And he said, look, you have to give people something they can't get anywhere else in quite the same way. And you have to solve a pain point. And he gave me an example of sales. So he has people calling him up through the Southeast for boiler problems. He gives them free advice for a half hour, gives them just enough information that they're dangerous, and then not enough information that they can execute on it because they don't have the resources. So he says the problem with so many people is they don't know how to solve problems. And ultimately, that's what happens when you want to gain influence and you're not helping people, you're not serving a market demand. Ultimately, you have to develop a knowledge or skill that most people don't have, and then you share it with them. And you build that proof of concept out with your collaborators, and then ultimately, customers come because you've built something that you know there's a massive demand for. Anyone that works in YouTube know who Hannah Hart is? She's a wonderful human being. She has a series called My Drunk Kitchen, and it's guess what it's about? Her drinking wine and getting tipsy and making food with her friends. She's a massive success. She turned it into a TV show. She has a best-selling book called My Drunk Kitchen. And she's done an amazing job branding her idea, but she is an endearing person. And she did a Hello Hardo tour, which was a crowdfunding campaign. And ultimately with her, she shared with me that you give now and people will pay later, and you have to hear their problems. So she went out and she galvanized her base because she knew they wanted a tour. She went around the country in a RV, and people who crowdfunded her project at a certain threshold were entered into a lottery. And she went to your house and drunk cooked and then made content around it. So you were collaborating in her videos. Who here knows what the term collab means in the YouTube ecosystem? It's not that technical, it means what you think, but collabing in YouTube is when someone has a video series, and let's say Peyton has a video series about building home security systems. He works at Nest, he's super into this category, and let's say he has 100,000 YouTube subscribers. Really compelling, super compelling guy, right? 100,000 subscribers is no small feat. Let's say the gentleman right here in the green shirt, let's say you have a business vlog, a video log where you talk about CES mainstream products. And let's say, what's a name for your channel if you had one? What's an interest of yours?
Food.
Food? What?
Food.
Food. So let's call it a Nerd Food Tech Zone. And you have 1 million subscribers, right? And Peyton, with his channel, has 100,000. So you do a collab. You appear in his niche channel, do a video together. You appear in Nerd Food Blog Tech. Is that what we called it? Yeah. And so you have a massive channel. So you collaborate. There's no money exchange. Again, it's a bartering system. You want to help make his channel better and get him new subscribers. But then equally, you know that he's very niche, and you can appear in his videos and be in a super target segment. So you share audience. And that bartering, that collab is really where influence thrives. I get back to the win-win of it all. You have to find a mutually beneficial way to collaborate with people. It could be through money, it could be through equity, or it could be through goodwill, but that's what I learned from all these YouTubers. And Brad Feld, anyone familiar with Brad? He started Techstars. It's a big startup accelerator in Boulder, Colorado, and they essentially give $25,000 to $50,000 to early stage companies to help them accelerate their ideas. And Brad, he talks about how you need to pilot your ideas. And piloting your idea comes down to testing something when the barrier to entry is low. So Brad started blogging at Feld.com, I would say back in 2005, right? So now he's one of the early adopter tech bloggers. And his advice to me was don't always have a defined goal. Sometimes start something for curiosity's sake. So he started Techstarters, which is a massive incubator and accelerator. He started it because he could make new friends, or he could turn it into a $1 billion business, but most likely it was going to be somewhere in between. So he's made new friends, and they've invested in thousands of startups, and he's been there for the early stage growth. He's become a mentor in the startup community. He even talks about topics like depression. Like he came on my podcast recently, he talked about OCD and depression, because he wants to help build communities. And ultimately, piloting your ideas is something where you can workshop when the stakes are low. Because if Nest breaks down, people get mad because they've paid a lot of money for the product. But if you're piloting something with the barrier of entry low and you have no customers, no one's using it, you can make those mistakes when no one's looking and the bright lights aren't on you. So these guys are the Vlog Brothers. Has anyone seen their work before? The Vlog Brothers are these guys. They're essentially they started a conference called VidCon, which is a big YouTube conference down in Anaheim, and they started very small. And their channel called the Vlog Brothers, they do science fiction or science videos, and they did one video blog a day to each other for an entire year. So they did 365 videos, and that's how they got started, right? They started small. So with influence, it's like naming your community is a massive opportunity because they called their community Nerd Fighters. And you notice they have the Spock fingers up here on their thumbnail because naming and identifying your community, like your Googlers, right? That's a community identifier. Having a community of people that recognize themselves can help you galvanize that base. And you think about, YouTubers. Like YouTubers, that's the people that make the YouTube videos and have subscribers. Like there's a connotation there. So identifying your customers, naming them, even just internally, helps you galvanize that base. And when you have an idea with the customer in mind, oftentimes there's two ways to go about it. One is you find that big vision, and then you pick a platform. So for me, my big vision, I'm going to write this influencer economy book. And I started my podcast to connect with influencers, to connect with audiences, because I'm a former stand-up and I love doing that, and to help tell stories so people can learn. But sometimes influencers and people that are influential, they start small with a vlog, and that turns into VidCon years later. And these guys are brilliant branders. One of their catchphrases is, "Don't forget to be awesome." Like, that's assuming you're already awesome, and they're reminding you not to forget it. So I think that's a wonderful way to think about how to build that relationship, is you got to brand your ideas creatively, and that's really where the authenticity comes into play. So another YouTuber I love is this guy named Freddie Wong. And it's funny because a lot of people, they don't know who he is, but if I ever have like anyone under the age of 16 in the crowd, they love this guy. He did a series called Video Game High School, which is like a Harry Potter for video games, where in the future, you all have seen it? Like in the future, there's gaming academies, and these professional gaming academies are gonna help save the world. It's amazing. It's been viewed 1 billion times online. And he's crowdfunded 3 campaigns for $2 million. He was crowdfunding before Spike Lee did it, before Veronica Mars, and before all these mainstream Zach Braff projects were on Kickstarter. And I loved how he used technology to his advantage. He figured out a way to leverage tech and be an early adopter, amass YouTube subscribers back when YouTube wasn't even monetizable. And he makes sci-fi videos that people love, and his crowdfunding campaign shattered records because ultimately, Freddie had these amazing perks. So I would take it most people at Google have supported a crowdfunding campaign. And I love crowdfunding campaigns, right? Because they give you updates continually. And so Freddie's perks define the accessibility of people with influence. For $5,000, he had a perk where you could go with the cast and crew of Video Game High School to Disney for the day. All you had to do was get to Anaheim. And then you would spend the whole day on roller coaster rides and Space Mountain with Freddie and his buddies that are in your favorite web series. He had another one for $3,500, I believe, where he would deliver fried dough to your front door anywhere in the country. Or the local equivalent if you didn't have fried dough, so glazed donuts. And so luckily he said that it was a person in New Jersey who started that bought that perk. So he's in New York and he shifted over for work. But ultimately, that kind of cleverness, right? Leveraging the technology. Can you imagine, what would Steven Spielberg even say to you if he was on your door? Like, sorry, Steven, if you're watching, but I mean, I asked the broader question is, the celebrity is a broad person with influence, but Freddie is on your mobile device. He's on your laptop. He's on your iPad. He's someone that you have a connected relationship with because he's truly influential and you're collaborating with him. I think everyone needs to just, if you haven't done a crowdfunding campaign, you're watching this, just support one. Because those emails you get, even when they are late and the project's overdue, they're with love. And you buy something and you pre-order it because you buy in and back it. I think the backing mentality is how marketers win in the new economy. You have to think of your customers as backers and let them drive to a larger goal where you give them a vision and say, I'm going to execute on this. I'll let you in on something. When I launched my book, I had an email list and some friends that I sent the book out to for free. And it's relevant because I used a Google Doc, so I know my audience. And I love Google Docs, right? So I sent it out and I said, if you give me an edit for the book, and this is like months before I was gonna launch it. If you give me any feedback, if I use it or not, I'll give you an editor title in my book. And I learned that from crowdfunding campaigns. Because I saw people that you could become an executive producer for video series and movies if you donated a certain amount of money. And my wife said, that's a terrible idea. Why would you give your book out for free? And what I learned was, it was the best idea I could have hatched. Because the people that left me the comments made my book better. And I pivoted part of it. And it actually had more actions and lessons for people to learn from. Moreover, the first people to buy my book at launch and leave reviews on book sites were my first crowd editors. And they all got in the book. So psychologically, they built it with me. I mean, I have a Gmail account, which is pretty much my name. I'm not going to give it out to everyone. But because I was an early adopter, right? And people love getting access early. And if you could figure out a way to psychologically make people feel part of the process, then you're going to be a winner. So how's everyone doing? We good? Everyone good? We're going to have some questions afterwards. So if you have questions even now, as long as you ask them politely, please. I used to do stand-up comedy, so this is a warmer crowd than dive bars in Baltimore. There's no smoky haze because it's non-smoking in this room. So a couple more examples is the giver mentality. Adam Grant, he's spoken at Google. Have you seen his work, Give and Take? It's a phenomenal book. Give and Take, Adam's a Wharton professor and a business consultant. He talks about how givers succeed more in life and takers, you obviously know who they are, right? They take the most in life, and most of us are matchers. So givers, takers, and matchers. And matchers are people that you help me quid pro quo. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. You want to collaborate with those people, right? But givers succeed the most, and they fail the most because you need to give with your own self-interest aligned. And you want to give with your own interest because why give for the sake of giving? Because you get taken advantage of. And that's truly remarkable. I wrote an article about why giving and helping others without expecting anything in return is the best business model for life. And I threw it up on the website, medium.com. And it's a blog engine, and it started getting surfaced. And it made its way to Adam. And I ended up getting an email introduction to him because I wrote this article. And oftentimes, putting yourself out there, taking a chance, even if it's a blog post that no one's going to read. Like I registered influencereconomy.com years ago, and multiple companies ago. I knew I was never going to be able to write the book when I had a crazy intense job. But I bookmarked it. I wrote a blog post. Well, I wanted Google SEO as well, because I don't want people searching influencer economy and having a Gawker Media post. But I ultimately did it because it was a reminder to keep this project going, because life gets in the way. And at Google, maybe some of your products get sidled or put on the back burner, but ultimately that blog post really helps you identify where you stand. And this is a guy named Troy Carter who I talked to. He used to manage Lady Gaga. He's a wonderful guy. He managed Lady Gaga and Eve, the rapper, Biggie Smalls, aka Notorious B.I.G. for those playing at home. And he was a club promoter back in the day, and now he's gone on to invest in companies like Uber and Lyft and Dropbox as an angel investor. And we talked about pivoting with him because he wanted to be a hip hop artist. He grew up in West Philadelphia, born and raised. So of course his idols were the Fresh Prince and Jazzy Jeff. So he pitched them in their studio after stalking them for a couple days, maybe weeks. And he realized his passion was in behind the scenes producing and managing talent. So he told me that you need to have that personal internal gauge to tell you when it's time to pivot. And oftentimes, like, people may not know that Twitter was originally a podcast network. Twitter was a podcast network called Odeo, but they realized at the time that Apple was going to dominate the podcasting landscape. Instagram was originally a check-in device like Foursquare, where you could tell people your location. But they got the market feedback, and they pivoted to make their idea better. And ultimately, pivoting comes down to moments in your career or with your products. But with Troy, I asked him, how do you go from being a talent manager in the music industry to being a prolific angel investor in tech companies? And he told me, it was really funny, he said, well, there's curiosity because I wanted to know if there was life on Mars in Silicon Valley as a music executive, and they wanted to know if there was life on Mars as a music industry veteran. And there was mutual curiosity. And he waited a year before he even did an investment because he wanted to survey the landscape. So pivoting doesn't mean just, hey, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and actually change my tracks. It means I'm going to enhance what I'm doing and leverage my opportunities and build on my network because I have established myself in one field and I can transition that into another. So that is what we're sharing today in the influencer economy with how to launch and collaborate and thrive. And this is the part where I talk about some pun related to stand-up comedy, because people always say, you need to tie it back to comedy. So I'll just give you one example of what I learned through stand-up was that you always got to finish your set. That was the hardest part, was when I was doing sets at open mics or at the improv, where I reached my peak, was you always have your set list on a cocktail napkin, whether you're drinking a beer or water, and you have your jokes. Bands have it as well on stage, and they have their set down. And I got heckled so hard at this dive bar in Baltimore that people were calling, like, look at me and think of any insult that stereotypically you could make for me, and that's what they gave me. And I gave up on my set. And that's what the advice I give to anyone with stand-up comedy or writing a book or launching a product is never get deterred and always follow your methods and your philosophy and finish your set. Because even if you get through it and you bomb, there's always the next gig that you can go to. So thank you very much for checking this out today.
I'd love to hear maybe just a little bit about how you've maybe shared some of those same principles that you walked us through, but in your life, like how have you applied some of this, Ryan?
Yeah, so for starters, I mentioned I have a podcast. If it was present day, I would not start a podcast right now because it's so competitive and noisy. But when I started it 3 years ago, I was an early adopter. And it was unique. So I could land a lot of A+ interviews with people like Seth Godin or Brad Feld that I couldn't get unless I had been an early adopter. And so that was a characteristic that I realized that I was fortunate to have, and that all these influential people I interviewed always thought about tech to enable them. And then equally, having that platform of a podcast could get me in the door with people that ordinarily may not be interested in what I'm working on. Because as you know, I worked at Machinima and these big startups and all these companies maybe you never even heard of. And so why would these influential people talk to me? But I pitched them on this big vision with the book. And who doesn't want to be in a book, right? And then also I had a podcast that I'm going to edit meticulously, and it's on iTunes. They can share it with their friends. And who doesn't want to talk about themselves for 45 minutes? So those two elements really got reinforced as I kept doing the research for the book.
So how did you make people come to the basketball games?
This group was an insurgent group. For those of you that study marketing, it's always good to have an enemy, right? Google started off with an enemy. My enemy in this PowerPoint is celebrities like Kim Kardashian and Seacrest. And so our enemies actually were the Memorial Maniacs. They were this group. They did things by the book, let's just say that. And so the Psychos is the group I started. And I stole the movie font from the movie and just put it on a T-shirt. And then Hitchcock, he's known for his outline, his soliloquy outline. So I took a Cornelius Vanderbilt silhouette and I put it on the back of the T-shirt. And I was the anti-Memorial Maniac. We're going to have fun. We're going to have parties before and after. And I made it more of an experience. So win or lose, you had that connected community. And also we went to school with a lot of fragmented fraternities and sororities and different organizations. So this was like a neutral party and location where we could all get together and rally and yell. And our team ultimately didn't even make the NCAA tournament when I started it. But I think having that community and the connectivity with others, I think a lot of people want to meet folks outside of their network. That's why Twitter and Facebook and all these communities exist in some ways, because you want to go out of network. So like helping people meet other folks that they wouldn't have met in college was actually a big part of it. And the basketball was secondary. It was really the community part of it. Nice recall. I like that question.
So do you tend to have one project you focus on at a time, or do you tend to have several projects going at once?
I have lots of products going at once. I think, like I learned from Brad Feld about piloting your ideas. I'll get on, as long as it doesn't take up too much time, like I prioritize my podcast, my book, my consulting business. I have an online course that I turn the book, inspired by the book. Actually, someone from the crowd, when I went on my book tour this summer, said, hey, you should put this into an online course. And so I just transferred all the data into a video series. And ultimately, I feel like the strength I've found is to be influential is if you can repurpose your message. There's a book called Making Ideas Happen by a guy named Scott Belsky. He started Behance that was acquired by Adobe. And he talks about how you need to be agnostic to the platform, but be mission-centric. So your mission should always be true to anything you do, whether it's writing a book, a podcast, your consulting business, a course, or any product you make. And that's a great way to help you prioritize what to focus on, because if you start going outside of your lane, then you can realize that, hey, maybe I'm veering off too much. But I believe strongly about piloting new ideas. Even if you write a blog post that no one reads, but it got something off your chest and makes you feel better, and you could share it to 5 people in your network, then there's value in that.
This is a topic that a lot of people talk about, and I just think that there's a lot of real content there. Very, very interesting. Thank you for that. On your point about metrics, so reality is a lot of the social networks and the places in which people congregate on the internet are all about subscribers, likes, and things like that, right? And you said that this doesn't necessarily mean whether or not you are an important influencer. But I guess for people who are arriving at any piece of content from the outside, that's the only thing they have on moment zero, right?
Right.
So I guess it becomes the ethos a little bit in a certain way. So how do you break this ice when you're starting out and you know you have something good to offer, but you're going to have to be faced with this rejection at first with your low numbers?
Oh yeah, you're going to be wholeheartedly rejected at first. Yeah, I see a lot of people through the course of my career that they build this amazing thing and it's like an empty house when they launch it. And they're like, say, where are the customers? I thought people would buy my book or download my product. And they don't realize that you consistently have to be in a phase of relaunching and that you pivot, and you listen to the market, you get the feedback, and then you relaunch. The internet has an incredibly short memory, right? Mistakes we made at Machinima on YouTube, we could just take the video down. People forget. Imagine the inundation of information we get through social media every day. People make mistakes, you own it, and you move on. And I think ultimately, perseverance is really like you have to have a bigger vision because you can get lost in the weeds. Like if you start a project, let's say you're writing a blog, and there's no bigger purpose, then you're going to lose focus. So if you can tie it into a longer term opportunity for yourself and say, this is a channel, this is a platform, I'm building an alpha prototype for a product, and I want to get to beta because that's going to get me to launch. And doing smaller milestones for a bigger vision, I feel like wrapping those two up together is a recipe for success. Because ultimately, it's so easy to lose focus because we're incredibly busy. And so if you don't have a bigger mission or purpose, and sometimes that takes time to discover. And if you don't just put yourself out there, then you'll never know. And so if you start something now, getting back to your part of your question about making it pop or making it successful, it's really finding that validation. Like with my podcast, I've had some fairly well-known people that I didn't invite on the show as episode number 3's guest. I built up 25 episodes, and then I knew, Willie Geist, who's hosted the Today Show from college. And I reached out to him at episode 25, and I said, I have this valid, audience. I started writing the book, and so don't go after influencers too early. It's like, but they can really help, like jet fuel, to get your product to market in an accelerated way. And then equally, once they're there, like make sure your website doesn't crash, make sure your product doesn't break. Like I was on the front page of Reddit with one of my podcasts, and I have children, and I was like walking my kid down the street, and I see this woman's tweet, and she's part of a community called Rooster Teeth, which is a YouTube network. She tweets out my link, and I'm like freaking out on my kid, and I'm pushing her down the street, and I like ran home and was just like, what's going on here? Like, is my website stable? Because I got that surge. And so really having the technology proved out. And if your website breaks, that's a great problem to have.
So your presentation is focused on like consumer goods and performances and things that mostly are, products being marketed out there to people. What about for things like political mindshare? Could the same general ideas and concepts be applied to something like a political campaign?
Absolutely. I think getting into the heart of the matter with finding problems and people's needs. So politics is interesting in two ways. One is how you reach people during the campaign season to find their problems, to then make them feel heard and say, I'm working on this. I'm solving this problem with you. I think that the most phenomenal tech campaign or political campaigns are run like a tech product, right? Where you do gathering and surveys and you build the alpha, you build that core community of people. They're going to help you reach a critical mass. And then you reach out to swing states if you're running to presidents, and you have to make a message that goes a little bit more mainstream in most cases. But ultimately, that core community of people whose problems you're solving is what's going to get you there. Like, student debt, right, for college graduates. That's a huge problem. 60 million people are affected by it. So if you run for president, that's a great market to address and figure out a way to solve that problem with that community like you would building a product at Google. And then secondarily, how bills get passed and how the back and forth, having open forums, town halls to get feedback on bills that you want to pass and have ideas. And I look at it like if you have 100 people that give you advice from a random sample set, if you get one big idea from that group, it's entirely worth it, right? And it gets people involved so they can help you transcend the message to other folks to get them on board. And I look at actually passing bills as with a tech angle as well, and that would be better served with Congress and with transparency, listening to people's needs, truly collaborating with the community, and ideally, both sides of the aisle.
I was just wondering, your book on Amazon has 200 reviews and all of them 5 stars. How did you do that?
So thank you for checking out the reviews. They're not vanity metrics; they're real-world metrics, right? So I'll tell you just the truth. Like, I was approached by a friend who's an author, and I don't know if I should be admitting this, but he said I self-published. He said if you want a publisher, then you need 100 Amazon reviews, because that's the 1%er of books on Amazon. So 1% of all books have 100 reviews. So he says you'll have that social proof if you actually get 100 reviews, and then I'll introduce you to my agent, and the rest is history. So the book's going to come out next year. We're translating it into Korean, simultaneously. And so 100 reviews is a huge threshold. So I would barter with people. And if you came to my book event this summer in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm signing books, and you have a long line of people that are asking in-depth questions, I would say, look, if you leave me an Amazon review, if you honestly, read the book, I will give you a free Skype consultation when I go back to LA, right? So I would barter with people, and they would give me amazing feedback on the book. I look at a book like software, and I'll publish 2.0 next year, and I'll use that feedback as part of the experience because people have told me how I could make it better. And so I found hooks like that where, people, like I'm on the board of my kids' preschool, and a bunch of people bought the book. And there's that phrase, just ask. Like, no one knows that Amazon reviews are currency. They don't know that it's a bartering economy, and that matters to people like me that are really getting the word out there. And the fact that it was noticeable, a Korean publisher, I had 4 people from Korea reach out to me in 3 weeks. And I imagine those reviews really mattered because you can get social proof from the community, right? Not just influencers. If you have 1 million YouTube subscribers and a bunch of Amazon reviews. So I really bartered with people because no one understood really, from my friends to people that would see it. So anyone listening now, please, if you leave an Amazon review, honestly, that would be amazing. And email me and tell me what you think about the book. Because you have to open yourself up to criticism. And the reviews actually are solid because it was the right focus group. It was the core community of people who want to read this type of content.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Peyton, and